Welcome to our final session this morning. We're very pleased to have state and district leaders who are on the ground on moving forward with the AI revolution in the schools. Dean Dan and the prior panels really set up things very well for this discussion. I kept writing more questions I wanted to ask the panel as we went. So let me very quickly introduce the panelists. They'll each take about 5 minutes for some opening comments and kind of set the scene. And then we'll have a very rich discussion, I'm sure, on some of the key topics of what it really is involved in using AI effectively in the schools, what are the risks, and where do we see things going in the future. So we'll begin with Catherine Truitt. Catherine just finished a term as the elected state superintendent of education in the state of North Carolina. She comes with a long history in education, from being a high school teacher to an education leadership coach to the education advisor to the governor of North Carolina to playing leadership roles in a couple of the different universities. We'll then move on to Tara Carrozza, who's the director of digital learning initiatives in the New York City Public Schools. Some of you may have already guessed, I'm a graduate of the New York City Public Schools. It's great to have her here. She also brings a rich background from being a special education teacher, a media specialist. She was involved in video production before that and has played a number of leadership roles in the New York City schools. We'll then move on to Kris Hagel, who's the Chief Information Officer in the Peninsula School District in the state of Washington, where he's played many roles in 18 years, helping make that district a real leader in innovation and technology. And his work has certainly been recognized and used by many districts around the country. And then we have Keith Krueger, who's the CEO of the Consortium for School Networking, known as CoSN, a role he's held for 30 years, well, almost 30 years, right? So he stays long. That's the membership organization of chief technology officers and other ed tech leaders in the school districts. And I believe you have more than 2,000 districts involved and 34 state affiliates. And Keith has just been a central player in ed tech for many, many years. They all deserve much longer introductions, but we want to hear from them, not from me. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Thank you, Isabel, for making this incredible conference happen for a second year in a row. It's really an honor to be in the room with so much brain power. I'm definitely coming to you with the practitioner's perspective, first as a teacher, then as a policy maker in the governor's office, and then finally really as a state chief leading public education across the 9th or the 10th largest state in the country, depending on the year. Just for some context, North Carolina has 115 school districts, about 2.6 million students, 100,000 teachers, and 5,600 administrators, and about a $16 billion education budget. I want to start with an anecdote that has to do with an article that I just came across last week that has nothing to do with AI. The article was not about AI, but it was about, the author was quoting Immanuel Kant from his 1784 essay on what is enlightenment. And this, I want to read something because it really struck a chord with me in thinking about what, as this session is titled, how are we going to guide education through the AI revolution? And in this essay entitled What is Enlightenment, Kant says, if I have a book to have understanding in place of me, a spiritual advisor to have a conscience for me, the doctor to judge my diet for me, and so on, I need not make any efforts at all. I need not think so long as I can pay. Others will soon enough take the tiresome job over for me. This has given me so much to think about. And someone, I think it may have been Dr. Reich, who touched on this in the last panel. When we think about the difference between adults having access to AI and learning to use AI and leveraging AI, whether it's personally or professionally, and students doing it, it's a very different proposition. And Kant's purpose in this essay was to define He was defining immaturity, and he was defining immaturity as the inability to use one's own understanding without the guidance of another. And his point was, we have to learn to think for ourselves, because that is what bravery is. And this is still so true today. And so I know that there are a lot of teachers who are, concerned with, well, is AI going to allow students to think for themselves? I talked to Isabel yesterday about adults and students being passive consumers of AI. And so it came as no surprise to me that my own AI journey as a state leader began when one of our largest districts, about 18 months ago, banned ChatGPT. So that was problematic for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is that it is an equity issue to ban something like that at school that not all students have access to at home. And so that sent us on a quest at the department to issue guidance. And again, I love that guidance is our title, because as the state education leader, state chiefs cannot tell districts and local superintendents what to do. And in the absence of guidance, we end up with legislation, like cell phone bans, et cetera. Someone had a piece of legislation regarding AI up on the screen earlier. So issuing state-level guidance was really the first step in encouraging ethical, responsible use of AI, helping teachers and local school leaders learn how to redefine cheating through an acceptable use scale. And Keith and I were talking yesterday, whether or not you see this as glass half full or half empty depends on your perspective, but only 26 states to date have issued statewide guidance for districts on how to adopt AI. And I bring this up because truly everything that we've been talking about so far is academic, no pun intended, if there is not statewide guidance in place so that local districts can decide how they are going to approach AI in their schools. How AI gets leveraged when teachers don't even know what Conmigo is, a lot of them, or Notebook LM, or any of the other tools that are available, which is most teachers, is problematic. And I will close my opening remarks by saying that higher ed has to be at the table in solving all of these challenges, not just around AI, but other things too. And from my experience, there's a tendency for higher ed to do its great and amazing work and research, and for that never to make it into the hands of practitioners. And finally, none of this is going to come to anything if our teacher prep programs don't start including a systematic and cohesive approach to teaching our pre-service teachers about AI in all of its facets that we've discussed today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And we'll certainly come back to our discussion about the many elements involved in education change. Tara.
We have about 1,600 schools, English language learners, students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged boroughs and areas across New York City, and a very rich, diverse, culturally fantastic population of students in New York City. And so coming here, I was thinking, first of all, I'm so grateful to be here at the Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. And I was thinking of humanity. And when I started teaching, Maya Angelou, quote by Maya Angelou, really resonated with me. People might forget what you say, who you are, but they'll never forget how you feel, how you make them feel. And so how does technology make our students feel? How does it make us feel about each other? How does it make us hopeful for a better future with learning and education? When I was teaching in the South Bronx, I taught at the largest District 75 high school in New York City. Shout out to everybody from New York who knows that. It's a non-geographical district for students with moderate to severe disabilities. And I absolutely fell in love with technology in the classroom. It gave students who are nonverbal a voice. It allowed me to communicate with parents when we didn't speak the same language. It created access to families, to other colleagues. And one of the most important things is it created learning opportunities that absolutely 100% otherwise wouldn't exist. And so there's power in that. But our power in technology is beyond just learning. Learning is a big business, education is a big business. New York City has a $40 billion budget. Just gonna let that sit in the air for a minute, okay? So thinking about what we've done in New York City with AI so far, this is also our chancellor, Melissa Ramos. These are her 3 commitments: safety, wellness, strengthening teacher supports, and fostering genuine community and family engagement. And so in New York City, let me go back here. This is some of the work that we've done. We've delivered over 10,000 professional learning sessions to, 10,000 people trained on professional learning in New York City in AI and digital literacy. We launched the first AI policy lab with the EdSafe AI Alliance, first in the nation. And what was most interesting about that is we actually started with students in Brooklyn North high schools. We centered students in developing policy. And so I encourage everyone in here, from the private sector, from the tech sector, and when we're building products, is do you have students helping you actually build the products and inform how we're thinking about them, how we're building them, not just using them. We have a huge Computer Science for All program that's been funded by Robin Hood Tech and Learning Foundation for the past 10 years. Tons of computer science experiences in our classroom, one of the largest programs in all the country. We've co-developed products with Microsoft, Google. We're here today at Stanford with a research partnership with OpenAI. And so really in New York City, we have so many opportunities, so many resources, but yet we're still not there and where we need to be with foundational math and literacy. And our students cannot afford to have this moment be an accelerator for systemic inequity that our society already suffers from. Okay, so some of the things we think are benefits and challenges. First, equity in education. Building a cohesive ecosystem with our tools actually allows for adaptive and personalized learning. Without that data infrastructure, though, it can't happen. And having that unified data system allows for equity to actually exist within the classroom. It allows students to look at their own data. It allows them to become agents of their own learning. But without having that data infrastructure, we'll never actually realize the promise of AI. Also, foundational math and literacy. How are we thinking about the products that we use to strengthen our core content areas? It's not enough to just, hey, here's another product, and here's another product, and how about this product? How about that product? We are overwhelmed with products. We're completely overwhelmed. And teachers are overwhelmed with information. We need to think about the well-being of our educators in this space, in this time right now. Thirdly, administrative efficiency. Yes, we know AI can really help with our efficiency. We have District 5 in New York City using it to cut down the time of teacher and principal feedback by 50%. I mean, that is incredible. That allows for human connection. That allows for that human-centered design. And then coming to our ethical, responsible, and evidence-based use of AI in the classroom, we all in this room need shared accountability to do that. And the best way to do that is through policy. And so thinking about our policy, thinking about our data privacy, and thinking about profit incentives cannot lead our learning outcomes. We have to think of learning first, even though I know there's folks in the room here who are definitely driven by profit incentives. But if we keep going in that direction, America will not be globally competitive in the way that it needs to be for our future. Education is the most important sector of any other sector in our country. It's a national crisis. If we want to be globally competitive, we really need to engage every community member in this process. And so, higher ed institutions, philanthropy, all you wonderful people in this room, how do we work better together? Because we have to orchestrate how we're doing this together. Singular, siloed research projects are not serving our collective ecosystem in New York City. They're flooding it. They're overwhelming it. And so we really need to co-design and take co-design as a policy, not as a nice to have. We have to build in equity safeguards. We have to create teacher-friendly tools and give them the time to actually learn the tools. I know that as a teacher in my own classroom, it was overwhelming the amount of different tools that we had. And so, you know, we're mandated to ensure that we're serving the whole child. We're serving, building those foundational skills. We're connecting with parents. We're taking care of the well-being of the whole child. But who's taking care of the adults? And that's where we need your help. And so, questions for this community that I want to leave you with. First, if AI can transform any other industry, why do we still treat education as the least disrupted sector in our economy? It's an economic dilemma. And what will it take with everyone in this room to finally treat AI in education as the national priority that it must be for us to thrive as a collective global community that centers humanity and people first? We gotta make everyone feel good about education, and we have to do it in a data-informed, unified infrastructure way. Thank you.
So glad that New York has you and Erin with bringing the passion for this work. I'm sure you'll
We are
move things
passionate
forward.
women, for
You
sure.
are. That is great. Chris.
Okay, is this on for me? I think it is. Okay, so kind of on the opposite size-wise as New York City. I'm from the Peninsula School District in Gig Harbor, Washington. We're about an hour south of Seattle. We have 9,000 kids, nowhere near that. You know, we've got about 600 teachers, and we've been embracing AI kind of, you know, we had teachers working through AI facilitated courses prior to ChatGPT even coming out. So we were having conversations, we were trying things, and so we were set up in a way back then in 2022. We had our superintendent a couple years before that had called me into his office and he said, "Kris, I don't want a technology department anymore." And that really, you know, kind of scares you a little bit because you're like, oh my God, what about my job? But he actually had a pretty good idea, and that was, you know, he wanted technology and teaching and learning to merge together and become one department. We formed the Department of Learning and Innovation at the time. And back then, our instructional facilitators, our content-specific people, used to sit right within 10 feet of my engineers that were building the networks and everything else in the district. And so, you know, when ChatGPT came out, I was just listening to them every single day, going back and forth, you know, the guys that are sitting watching every new thing that's coming out of Silicon Valley and saying, hey, you guys got to get on top of this. You guys got to get on top of this. And so we were fortunate. We had some people, some of our instructional staff that said, all right, let's sit down with high school English teachers and figure out what this is going to look like. And we did that in January of 23. So, you know, about a month and a half after ChatGPT came out. And to their credit, our English teachers only freaked out for a few minutes. And then they were like, you know, there's some things that we've always known that we were doing wrong in teaching English and teaching writing in the high school level. And maybe this is the catalyst we needed to make a change. And so that kind of started us down our route. You can see our digital learning facilitators, my instructional technology people that I had in my department, built out a 2-year roadmap of what we're going to do with AI in the classroom. And we started an AI action research team. We brought together about 35 teachers from all across different curricular areas, different subjects and grade levels. And we kind of went down 2 different paths. We had our digital learning team working on one-on-one coaching and professional development with teachers in the classroom. And then we had kind of our really most interested front-end teachers really exploring what AI can do in the classroom. And then unfortunately, we ended up having to cut 8% of our budget. And our new superintendent at the time said, I want as much of the cuts as we can to come from the district office. And so at that time, we lost all of our instructional facilitators. We lost all of our digital learning coaches. They all went back into the classroom to teach. And so that kind of left us in a weird holding pattern of, me being the only person left to kind of lead this work in our district. And so I knew that I had to keep this AI action research team together because they were really helping us with what we're doing in the district. I remember being here last year, and I think it was Keith that was up on stage, and he said, if your theory is to just let 1,000 flowers bloom in your organization, that's not really a good plan. Unfortunately, that was exactly what I was doing at the time. And it's kind of working out for us. We're kind of having to think differently. Necessity is breeding a little bit different of a plan for us to move forward with AI. And so we're really relying hard on our classroom teachers to lead and to help us develop what we're doing. And then we at the district level are reacting to that. I spend a lot of time, I provide a lot of release days for our teachers to get out of the classroom and just converse with their peers and say, what is working for you? What is not working? What can we study? What can we collect data on and see how that works in the classroom? And that's led us to a lot of the work that we do. We were one of the first districts in the country to have guidance around AI. It was featured in the Teach AI guidance that went out. It's featured in our state guidance. Our guidance is used in 10 different states. I know this because I see the Google alerts that come up, and there was a district on the other side of the country that still left the words Peninsula School District in it when they put it on their website. That's fine. That's what we're here for. We're out there trying to figure this out, and we're constantly adapting and evolving based off of what we see and we hear in the classroom. Our teachers right now are, we did a survey of all of our teaching staff back in December and said, how are you feeling around AI? What does this look like to you? And I looked at the data for the first time and I said, wow, that really looks like something I've seen before. And I was like, oh yeah, that diffusion of innovation theory and the curve of early adopters to laggards or innovators to laggards. And so like any good technologist, I had AI analyzing this data and I said, all right, lay the diffusion of innovation curve right on top of this. And it was fascinating to see it matching almost exactly after 2 years of where our teachers dispersed themselves across our organization. And so, we're trying to do what we can to, just keep innovating, keep trying new things. Because we've had guidance since the beginning, because we've been working with our teachers and we say, hey, these are things you can try, these are things not to try, we're able to adapt and evolve. And, starting this year, looking at what teachers were doing, we realized, boy, we better get a little more clear on data privacy with AI. What is safe to do in different tools? What is not safe to do in different tools? We've got a partnership with Vanderbilt University. They released an open source enterprise AI tool that we've installed that runs completely in our infrastructure. And so there's a little bit different things you can do in that because it runs in your infrastructure versus, putting things in ChatGPT. And so, being clear with staff around what is it possible to do? Once you have a private infrastructure where where all of the data is going and where the AI lives, your possibilities get to be a little bit bigger. You can dream a little bit bigger. Our assistant director of special ed came to me and said, hey, I'd like to analyze IEPs. Is there a way we can do this with AI? And I said, yeah, I think we can. I think I am comfortable with the way that we're looking at doing this because we have this running in our infrastructure and allows us to think differently. So that's just some of the things that we've started to talk about. When you have this foundation that you're building, and Keith's going to mention it a little bit bigger, we've been working based off of the CoSN AI maturity model and structuring our organization around that to be able to facilitate an adaptation of what we're doing. We're trying new things. I would say back in December, our superintendent brought together all of her superintendent student advisory group and brought them together. This year, we're working on focusing on student belonging. And so we asked them, is it okay if we created a transcript of this entire conversation? You're talking about bullying, you're talking about things in school that matter. We would like to see if we could analyze this conversation. It doesn't track any of you and who you are, but your conversations are important. So we took all of these transcripts, put them into AI and asked it to listen for things that we may not have picked up. Maybe that we have a bias that we wouldn't have heard. We have our own ideas of what's going on and it's wrong in schools, but maybe the kids are saying something that we're not picking up on. And it was fascinating once you get some of that data back to look at the ways that you can actually, help make change in schools when you're not, in your own box that you've always grown up in. I've been doing this for 25 years in schools. There are things that I see in our schools that I think I know. And when you have somebody impartial that can look at that or has a different view on what this looks like, you can get some better answers. I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just move to this. With all of our work, we decided that it was important that we start sharing it with the world. And so we put together a website in our district with all of our guidance, with blog posts, stories of the work we've been doing. All of our presentations we give either professional development or at conferences are all logged here. We started cataloging tools for our teachers. Our research director, James Cantonwine, has been building out a research catalog, a library for our teachers to reference. And then our staff are starting to submit, we've got about 50 in there now, of different use cases, including prompts and what they were trying to do and how AI impacted them, whether that's an operational task that our transportation director was doing or a teacher in the classroom that was trying something new with kids. And so we put this up here. It's all licensed under the Creative Commons. We want people to just have it, take it, reuse it, remix it, do whatever you want with it. It's all here. And I just wanted to make sure and share that with everybody today, and you can access it there.
Great. Thank you, Kris. Your resources certainly have been a wonderful asset for many people. And I can't resist noting that I believe there were about 9,000 students in my high school in New York. But I think there's an important point here. There's ranges, and there's a lot of districts that are much smaller than that also. And the range of thinking about how to help people implement AI across the range from New York City to small rural districts is an enormous challenge. Keith.
Well, that's a great lead into, I run the National Association of the, it's on, I think. It's on, isn't it? Yeah. So I run the National Association of people like Tara and Kris and Patrick, and in fact, all of them are above average. I grew up in Minnesota, in Lake Wobegon, where all children are above average, but they truly are. And so what I thought I could do is to just add a little bit, and some of you were here last year, heard some of this data. I think there have been kind of, in the last 2 years, as Dean Schwartz pointed out, there have kind of been different approaches that different school districts have. The first was perhaps to ban it, and maybe New York City, the previous chancellor was in that. We blocked.
Formally banned.
Correct? Okay, blocked it. Others have been saying they're going to let 1,000 flowers bloom. And in fact, New York quickly changed within 6 months to that category. And then, the kind of duck and cover. And so we do a national survey, and I thought to ground our conversation. Again, these are the people who are in charge of technology. They're administrators, they're not classroom teachers, but they are the ones that oversee sort of how AI is being implemented. And this is a survey from our 2024 survey. And I will say that the 2025 survey will be coming out next month. So the largest answer was not defined in terms of how they're thinking about AI. I've seen the data that we're going to release next month. I can't give you specific percentages, but I'll tell you that the not defined has gone down, and what's gone up is the depends on use case. And honestly, I think that's a pretty good answer for where we are today, because it really does depend on the situation. We also wanted to know why at least chief technology officers are interested in AI. And the number one answer is productivity, closely followed by personalizing education. So I think back to the earlier panel where, are we trying to block it? Are we trying to just automate and create productivity, or are we going to transformational? So, and I think, we're at an early stage. We're on the productivity side. We also wanted to know what are the problems that people are trying to solve in school districts. And hopefully, as you as researchers or students are thinking about solving real problems. So our audience, again, they're in charge of technology. Their number one concern is cybersecurity attacks. They're concerned that cyber criminals will be using that. But closely behind that is just the lack of teacher training and integration, understanding what the opportunities are. I will say we'll have new data about what are the AI strategies, and we're going to see that a lot of focus on training is probably the biggest area that school districts are focused on. But you can see all the other concerns that educators have: cyberbullying, privacy of data. In fact, for the next year, privacy of data is going to be right at the top. So if anything anyone can find on research and best practices is going to be important. The spread of false information, hallucinations. I think we've already talked about fake data. The interesting thing I just want to point out is the bottom reason why at least these administrators are thinking about AI, the least thing is that it's going to replace teachers. So I think that should be conveyed. We want this to be a technology to better improve teaching and learning, not replace teachers. The thing that Kris alluded to that I think is powerful that CoSN's been working on, we've worked on it with the Council of the Great City Schools. Those are the big urban school districts like Tara. And we created a maturity model. So it is organized under these domains, of which it includes academic integrity, but we think that the conversation for school systems needs to be much broader and go to everything about operational readiness. Well, at the superintendent level or at the state level, they need to be thinking about executive leadership. What are your policies or guidance that you're allowing? Is your data ready? School districts have a huge amount of data, and it's often not, as Aaron said, interoperable. It's often siloed. It's often not in good, clean shape. So if that's what you're using for generative AI for predicting, you're probably going to get bad or biased information. So if you're interested in that, take a look with that QR code. And you can see we have intentionally partnered with superintendents, with principals, with the School Boards Association, because we think that all of the administrators need to be at the table. This isn't something that only the Chief Technology Officer can lead. They do have a role, like Kris has and Tara has in their districts, but unless the superintendent, unless the head of operations, unless the head of curriculum are really thinking about these new opportunities, we're not going to get there. I'd also, we heard earlier from Aaron about the EdSafe Alliance. I also want to mention another coalition that CoSN's part of, which is the Teach AI and the work that's been done on policy. We heard from Catherine about what's happening at state level that 26 states have adopted. We're actually seeing a lot of movement. Well, first of all, the new survey that will be coming out will say that just over 50% of school districts have not done anything yet around changing their policies. But where we do see movement is around changing academic integrity policies. Somewhere under 50%, but a large number, and also around acceptable use policies. Only a few districts are actually creating completely separate new AI policies. So if you're interested in that, the good news for our audience is you don't have to start with a blank page. There's lots of people, like Kris and others, and you can move faster if you have buy-in from your leadership. And one of the last things I want to mention is some of the work we've done with CAST around accessibility. We think it's very important that AI is designed thinking about all students and particularly embedding that from the beginning. So if you're interested in that, take a look at that. And the last thing I'll just say is, as the National Association, and having run this for 3 decades, I get a lot of questions can you predict, what's going to be the most important, in this instance, AI technology? And I think prediction is a real challenge. It's better that we invent solutions that actually meet the problems that we're trying to solve. And I would direct you, if you're starting a research project, to start looking at this educator research project that happens annually called the Driving K-12 Innovation, and particularly look at the first bucket of hurdles. Every year it identifies what a group of experts think are the most important hurdles we're trying to overcome. Then it also looks at how is the world changing with accelerators. And third and last, and only last, do we look at the tech enablers. And I see Mary Lang there, one of our advisory board members. But I think that's a way to start thinking about in AI, and frankly for all technology, is what are we trying to solve, and rather than starting the conversation with the technology.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Keith, and thank you all. I think you've done a great job building on the prior sessions, really highlighting that there is real progress in K-12 schools. It's complex. There are lots of challenges. And I'd like to just take advantage of your being here and dig in a little further on some of those challenges, and then come back to how the other folks here in other areas can be really supportive. And one, Dean Dan started us off well, contrasting learning by creating versus learning by being told. Victor talked about what is it that students need to learn. And we know the reality of in schools, and I've been at this for many, many decades, they're told to do so many different things. And there's always, oh, this needs to be added, this needs to be added, this needs to be added. Nothing is ever taken away, just things are added. And so I'd like to say, ask you, looking ahead for the next few years, and then perhaps further than that, what are really the most important things? I mean, schools try to do too many things at once. What would you recommend as what they focus on with AI in education for the next few years? Are you about to start, Tara? Go for it.
I think that the overwhelming amount of tools really makes us lose track of the primary purpose of K-12, and I'm going to be very specific on K-12. In this space, there's a lot of sound, noise, and resources going to AI and workforce readiness. But AI and workforce readiness can't happen if you don't have students who have foundational literacy and numeracy skills. And in order to actually build digital skills, you need those foundational literacy and numeracy skills. And so I think that moving forward, we really need to redefine what literacy means in the age of AI. So data literacy, information literacy, media literacy, digital skills. It's a combination of things. And digital equity, by definition, is not just access to high quality broadband or internet access. It's also the digital skills and the applied digital skills. And how do all of those work in context? And who gets access? Who decides who gets access to those? Who decides who's building those streamlined systems? And so I think one proactive thing, which North Carolina has done a great job of, is a unified digital learning plan for K-12 schools. At the state level, we have so many different things or so many different ways of building thriving ecosystems. We need a unified model of what that looks like, and then contextualize it to your personal community. We also need I'm going to keep talking about data, unified data systems and open data standards.
One of the things that I love about this conference is that the panels that I've heard earlier today really are starting to get at the root of what of the science of teaching. So we talk about art and science of teaching a lot in public K-12 education, but really I don't think there's enough emphasis on the science of teaching. We still have a system where the learning is the variable and the time is fixed, right? That's how our system of education has been for the last 120 years. We have not been able to move away from the Carnegie unit and seat time as a measure of learning. And so I am very concerned about how we're going to pivot away from the way we've always done things. And, there are things that we should have done already that we haven't done. And now we have to do, this what teachers will call one more thing with the integration of AI into their teaching practice. But the thing is that kids are not cheating more today than they were before. They're just cheating differently. And so and it's not just K-12, it's higher ed as well. And so what I hope is going to happen, what I hope AI is going to force the education community to do in K-12 is to really look at the science of teaching, and teachers are going to have to start being much more intentional about what they assign, the kinds of assignments that they give. If you don't want kids to cheat, give them a reason not to cheat. If you don't want them to use AI, give them a reason not to use AI. I have, my youngest child is in high school, and I've spent a lot of time talking in classrooms the last 4 years and talking to high school students in particular. And even students in AP classes will tell you that they feel high school is irrelevant. So even our students who are poised to come to Stanford will tell you, yeah, I mean, it's just something that I have to do so that I can get where I want to go next. So my hope is that the AI revolution will revolutionize the art and science of teaching.
I'll just make a couple of quick things. When we heard Dan this morning talk about AI for creation, it kind of tied to something I was reading on the plane down yesterday about, how are you helping your students realize that they need to be value creators, and what is the value that they create in the world when they leave your system? And I think that's an important one. I am a guy that's a technologist by heart. 30 years ago, I was in college for computer science, and so I didn't come from the teaching side of the house. I came from the operational side of the house, and I think a lot about my path and how that is different. And I spend a lot of time listening to some of the people that are probably here in from Silicon Valley that are talking about all the power that AI is going to give. And I worry a little bit about our preparation with our kids, because I think sometimes we don't think enough about what is the world going to look like a few years from now, and what is the human element going to be in your life, And so I like that a lot. The other thing I wanted to add on to Tara's comment she just briefly touched on it, was getting your data ready. We've been experimenting. We had a college extern in December, and I had her work to fine-tune a large language model with some of our own internal data. And we very quickly realized that we are in no way, shape, or form ready for those kind of conversations in our district. And I think we've been thinking about it for a while, but I don't think schools inherently are ready, both from a kind of a big picture standpoint, but also from a very technical standpoint, that we're not ready for some of the things that AI has as possibilities, because we haven't done the work to get our data ready and get it in formats that it's usable and really truly usable with some of the technologies that are coming out.
And I'll answer from the perspective of the teaching. And I mentioned the Driving K-12 Innovation annual work. And the number one hurdle that we've been hearing from our experts is attracting and retaining teachers. And so for an average teacher, maybe half of her or his time is in front of students. So, it may seem frivolous to talk about AI for productivity, but AI for because we're not talking about profitability or return to shareholders like you would in other industry sectors. But time is a huge value. And in fact, teachers are burnt out. They're working evenings, weekends, doing lesson planning, grading, administrivia, taking attendance. So if there's a way we could recapture, I don't know, even 10% of their time and let that be back into time with students, that could be so I think, but it isn't AI for AI's sake. It's AI, how do we make it more of an appealing, attractive, modern profession?
Am I on? Now I'm on. Yes, thank you. I have so many questions in so little time. I'm going to jump ahead to one. A lot has come up about equity. And I'll go back to Dan's distinction between learning by creative and learning by being told. In this country, and I know all of you know this, but we have a very large number of underserved, under-resourced, often called high poverty schools that serve large numbers of students in poverty. And we know in these schools there's lots of challenges, including the fact that they tend to have a lot of teacher turnover, less qualified teachers, and many, many big challenges. And this is a critical national issue. To take a very specific case of the equity problem, I'm also on a Brookings task force looking at what could go wrong. And one of the things that go wrong is that the students in the more privileged schools will be using AI for creativity, and the students in the less privileged schools will be using AI to basically learn by being told. What are your responses to that, or what can we do to prevent that really negative scenario from coming to be the case?
Well, in the audience is Mike Tricano, and you know, at least last year here at the summit, there was a lot of conversations about tutoring chatbots, and you know, the equity opportunity there is for making a tutoring AI for every student. And he rightly points out that there's a great inequity if the only kids that have human tutors are the wealthier kids in the wealthier schools. So, I mean, that's just one example of how, yes, there's theoretically a scalability opportunity for equity purposes to use some of these new technologies, but they could also be exacerbating the inequities that we have. Sorry, I've previewed Mike's argument.
So I couldn't agree more, Keith. I think access to hyperscale AI tools for every student and school district is it's a coming together of the private sector, of putting our money where our mouths are in terms of saying education is important in America, and figuring out how we work between private sector, philanthropy, nonprofits, higher ed research institutions to make sure that actually is a reality. And it's not going to happen overnight, but without doing that, we're actually just, we're monopolizing the data that's student data that's going into these models, and thereby just exacerbating our systemic and social inequities that we really can't afford moving forward. And so the FDA has a model of, you know, going to market with a drug that was cut down by 50% from 3 years to 18 months using AI. I can create a tool today and it can be in a classroom tomorrow. There's no governance around the quality of tools. There is some governments, because I know there's folks in the audience, Digital Promise, it's the CoSN with certifications for tools, but it's not unified. There's not a universal stamp on ed tech tools that say, you know, that allow teachers to make informed decisions around it. And then we don't have the leadership training for superintendents and leaders in education who don't have the tech background, who don't have that language or understanding. And so we really need to invest in reskilling leadership and having leaders at the table together, chief academic officers and CIOs and CTOs. And what is the foundational knowledge, skills, and abilities that those groups collectively need to share and reskill on? Boom.
Boom. Did you want to anything? Or? Okay. I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity and have 4 great education leaders talking to this audience from industry, from research, from schools, from academia. And really, Tara, you've already addressed quite a bit, but I wonder if there are other thoughts. What is it that K-12 needs from the research, development, and industry folks who are here?
Should we start and go down the line?
Yeah, sure.
So this is I love this question because I've personally experienced what I believe Emma brought up earlier about the length of time it takes for research to get to the people who need it. I experienced this during the pandemic, and North Carolina has a very robust research ecosystem with 32 private independent colleges and universities, 17 public universities. So first of all, my advice to researchers is that before you define your problem once and for all that you're going to research, talk to people who are in the trenches to make sure that, A, this really is a problem, and that you have the context that's needed in order to do research that's going to be useful. If you haven't been in a classroom, go visit classrooms. That would be one thing. And then I mentioned this earlier, make sure that your research doesn't end up in a journal on a shelf. Make sure that it ends up in the hands of people who can actually use it. As far as R&D goes and developers, my advice to entrepreneurs in the ed tech space and to companies in the ed tech space is realize that districts are not going to have money. We, as Tara has said multiple times, we're flooded with products. States are typically most states are pay to play, where you have to have a lobbyist and meet with legislators if you want to get the state to pay for your product. And most districts are not going to have extra money to buy products. So pilot your product for free in a district so that you have data to show that it works, and then get your lobbyist and go to the legislature and try and get your product written into the schools.
Go ahead.
So I think that we all have a shared agreement that every child in America is deserving of a free and appropriate public education. And so in order to do that, we need governance, we need policy, we need to come together, higher ed academia, we all love you, but it feels so separate, honestly, from K-12. It feels separate from how it's lauded in comparison to K-12. It feels more respected than when you're in the trenches. Frankly, I had to change adult students when I was a teacher, and there's just realities that you're dealing with on a daily basis that are not in the consciousness of research and developers. And so we need to increase our collective consciousness, and we need to work together to do it and create these shared agreements through policy and governance across state lines, across K-12 to research institutions. And we really need the private sector to come to the table and respect education, not just respect higher ed, respect all of education, and work together to meet this moment. Like, creativity is awesome. It feels so good to learn when you get something, or when you're teaching something, you're like, I got it. What else can I do? Like, that's the state we need to move forward to. And AI has that promise, but only if we work together as human beings.
Okay, I think I have a mic that works. I'm going to take that a couple of ways. Erin mentioned earlier that she's been talking about interoperability for years. I know she has. I've watched her for feels like 20 years now. I remember talking about data interoperability at a conference in Atlanta in 2006. And I feel like now, 19 years later, it's not really that much better. I mean, it's a little bit easier for me to give you my data to a vendor. It's still virtually impossible to get the data from vendors back to me. Don't make it so hard on school districts. If you're from the private sector, don't make it so hard. We talk a lot about student data privacy. I'm much happier when I see a vendor show up and say, hey, I've already signed the National Student Data Privacy Agreement. I've already done this. Here's the stuff in front of you. When I have to spend all of the time begging you to go to your lawyers and figure out, this is, will you accept the Washington State Student Data Privacy Agreement, which is essentially the same as the national one. Those kinds of things, come to a district with those things already prepared and make it so much easier on us. Make it so that we don't have to do so much work, because we have a lot of things to spend our time on, and going through that. I would say on the research front, kind of the same thing. I'm fortunate to have a great research director in our district that reads a lot of this research and then deciphers it for the rest of us. But make it easier for us in schools to consume what you're putting out. we don't have time to read all of it. You know, we need to be able to know what is actually effective practices, but we need to be able to get to it easily and inexpensively. So many things are hard for us to get in schools these days.
And I'll answer from a very personal perspective. Thanks to Isabel and some of the other people in this room, I've been able to be here as visiting for the last 3 weeks. So I'm totally impressed with all of the relevant research that is happening and thinking about the creativity. But there is this chasm between practice and reality. And so we have to be more creative. We have to show up. More people, like the people on this panel, need to be here at these sort of conversations. Likewise, I'm hoping that some of you start showing up. You know, we have a national conference, 1,200 chief technology officers. Go listen to what their pain points are. Read the things that we have on our website. You know, we do a lot of survey work about what they're trying to solve. So I think there's huge opportunities, and you know, I want to continue that conversation, and I'll be back this fall for another 3 weeks.
Okay, final lightning round in our remaining minute. So let's end on an optimistic note before we all go have a nice lunch. Looking 10 years ahead, assuming things go really well, go visit a school. How is it different? Anybody? Keith, do you want to start at that end, or do you want to start here?
No, go ahead, Catherine.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to say what I said before, which is that the science of teaching is going to be something that we see on a day-to-day basis in the classroom, and that students will be engaged in the work that they're doing, and will be constructing meaning and learning, and that school will be a very different experience for them than it is now.
I think, one, my hope is that every school, and then across state lines, has a comprehensive learner record from pre-K onwards. And that comprehensive digital tool actually represents the whole child. And then beyond that, using AI, we take our workforce index data across, you know, globally, and we actually start recommending to every student in our country what pathways are possible based on their competencies and skills in core areas. And then true equity exists. That's one of the things. There's so many more.
I would say student agency, you know, allowing students to figure out what are the problems they want to solve in their life and figure out how that their learning is going to get them there. I think that's where I really want to, and I think that it's possible, but giving them the skills they need to solve the problems that they want to solve when they leave education.
And I think I'll just use the word engagement. I mean, right now we're really good and have kids engaged at kindergarten, and it's a long, steep decline by the time the average student is in middle school or high school, they're bored. And hopefully we can use some of these new tools and more to engage students in an exciting opportunity to learn.
I have to add my own, that we'll go to schools and teaching will be a high status, highly desirable profession that's drawing the best and brightest of our young people.